Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the Amira Show. And we have our special segment today, which you told me in the email, EP, but we didn't come up with a special word for E yet. But the P is policy, correct?
That's what I'm thinking.
That's
But you're
okay.
better at this than I am. So
I hadn't had a chance to think too much on it because I'm on my dick 'em down Valentine's Day weekend getaway. So I hadn't had time
do
to
you
think
want to
about
say
it.
more about that? Or I'm very
It's fun.
interested.
We had our prior episode last week talking about dick 'em down Valentine's Day ideas, and I wanted to fashion it towards ideas that can be done safely during COVID.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
we didn't talk too much about it. We got distracted with our guest and trailed off every time an idea was put out there. Food was the biggest thing, but
Ah,
my idea was to so you can travel. I mean, despite the weather's pretty. I mean, it was bad. It's okay here, it's just cold and sunny, but um I was like, travel out of town to a hotel and literally just be in the hotel. I was just like, we were gonna like grab a griddle and like crock pot and just make food in here and snack. We have alcohol galore. And that was pretty much it. It was gonna be like a trip away, an inside trip away.
shit.
We did leave to go get brunch though, so it's just so hard to just stay our asses put. But that was the best idea I came up with, but that was only because I knew that's what we were going to be doing. So whatever, we'll see from here, I guess.
I mean, it sounds good to me. I sounds pretty safe and
Yeah, I was like,
the
you can
best
do
thing from
that,
what
stay in, go get an Airbnb or something. Like getting away is cool, but find ways to where you're satisfied with just staying inside. I even put out there, we had a chef on our last episode, and I was just like, that's an idea. You could invite a private chef um for you to or for them to cook for you, or even you could cook. Like that would be an activity right there, like trying to whip up some steaks as your dinner or something like that. That should be fun. Whoever fucks up their steak the most has to take a shot. I don't know, something like that.
well, I would be the winner of that. I do not cook. That's funny because I was just having a conversation with one of my friends
You
about
don't
that.
cook?
I'm
It's
just
okay.
cooking stresses me out. I have baking mind. I love
That's
to
what I was going to say.
bake.
I can bake. I mean, not even like natural that I know exactly how much butter and sugar. I enjoy following the directions and just the whole baking process. Waiting. I don't mind waiting. But a lot of my friends are
I
like,
agree. I,
we gotta cook and get it done now. I gotta eat while I go. I'm like, whatever. I'm trying to do good, I guess, or cook a little bit more, I guess, because it's cheaper. But as Carmen has put out there, Carmen will be taking the shot.
I said I would win in theory. So
You did, but then your follow up was like, I don't cook. I was like, well, probably gonna
yeah.
lose. But I'm so excited, Carmen, to have you on here. We're finally getting our episode or our segment booted back up. Last year it was a struggle, but trying to come a little bit cleaner for 2021. As soon as we let y'all know, or as soon as we come up with the E is in our title of our segment, we will let y'all know. It's no rush, it's whatever. But I'm so excited. Today, we're going to have a little introduction when it comes to what exactly we're going to be discussing when it comes to the segment and how it relates to um, my listeners, people who are freaky, whatever it is, or just the general public, like why things and discussions around health policy um, is an important conversation to have, among friend groups, among your family, just in general, yourself in the mirror, who knows? So, Carmen, go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone.
Sure. So hopefully some of your listeners know who I am, but just as a reminder,
Right. This is a reminder.
yes. And you know what? I have, put on a new hat actually since the last show, which was, I think, last May, actually. I checked this and it's been a while. I was
A
like, oh
hot
my God.
minute.
Yeah. So I feel like a whole new person since then. So, yes, my introductions. Um, so I am still doing the doctoral work, the doctoral lifestyle, doctoral health at University of Louisville in health policy. So that's my focus area. And I am also, as of last year, a policy analyst with an institute called the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, which is very exciting. So I focused on criminal justice analysis work, and we will be talking about that a lot. And it fits very well because, as you know, and as I'm sure your listeners know, that intersects a lot with health stuff,
Yes.
especially when it relates to our people. So
Mhm.
really excited about that. That's what I do. So I'm
Awesome.
excited to drop knowledge and whatnot. I'm like trying to think of cool slang. I'm not cool anymore. There's a switch that flips at a certain age where you're just like, I don't know what the slang is. I don't know what the TikTok is. Like, I don't
I
know what's
know.
going
I feel
on.
like I'll get there soon. I'm not a TikTok or anything like that. So I just feel like mine is really gonna hit at some point. Or I'm just gonna be straight raunchy. Like no creativity to my words, it's just raunchy. So I don't look forward to that, but I guess I need to
Oh,
embrace that with open arms. I guess.
I'm just rolling with it. I've made the old black lady switch. Like at some point I started carrying peppermints in my purse all the time and it's what it is. That's what it is. I'm there
That's
now.
what you gotta do. So Carmen, through this segment, of course, we're going to converse about our chosen topics, but this will probably be more of a segment where you're not just we're conversing. I'm asking questions as they come, but you're probably definitely going to be teaching me so much because I feel like the audience, it would be lucky if we had others who were like, yeah, uh-huh, like they are having the conversation in their head or they know exactly what's going on. For me, though, I don't. This is all new to me. I know we tried to dive into it last year, but I don't think we're ever able to give. We had a few shows, but outside of that, I don't think we're ever able to give it the focus and attention necessary. And I had a heavy interest in um, the prep work that you were into when it came to prep HIV and what that meant for our gay Black community. So I'm excited to kind of be learning about things outside of that. Not saying that was a narrow situation or does it matter, but I'm excited to learn more, especially given our current climate. It's just good for us to be on the well with all. And as a Black person, I definitely need to be a little bit more educated in areas that could assist us in a world that doesn't want to tell us anything and just would rather us float along not knowing shit. Will tell us whatever and we just kind of go with it if we just don't know what's best. So I'm pretty excited. I guess let's start with the basics. So, new year, new us. Let's start with the basics. What exactly or how would you describe health policy? Um, what is that necessarily?
Yes. So health policy in the most like technical terms, you can call it all the huge world of laws, regulations, procedures, and actions that, either governments or even non-government institutions like companies and any other types of organizations you can think of. So all of those things that they do that lead to certain outcomes related to health. And so, health policy, it feels like a cheat to say that it's really in everything, but it truly is. It can be about health systems themselves. So often people in my discipline are traditionally focused on actual healthcare systems work. So that can be like quality of, medical care, like from doctors and nurses or whatnot.
Yeah.
It can be about addressing the cost portion or helping people get access to those services through expanding insurance. So I'm sure the first health policy thing that people will think of, whether they know it or not, is usually health insurance related, because that's the thing we talk about in public the most, but it's
Yeah.
other things as well. But it can also be policy that's not focused on the healthcare system specifically, but is related to outcomes that will affect your health in some way.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and so traditionally that could be within public health systems, like disease prevention, very relevant right now with
Mm,
COVID-19 pandemic, or like occupational health safety. That's a big one that also is in public health and is a product of health policy.
gotcha.
Um, and related systems even. I mean, criminal justice is one, which, as you know, we're going to talk about a lot in coming segments and maybe even today, but also you think about housing or child welfare, or honestly, even, you know, probably every economic policy is a health policy. uh, is a health policy, you know, thing as
Jeez.
well. I mean, think about the $15, you know, minimum wage discussion,
Yeah.
which is so important right now, and I'm really excited about, including the fact that I have to just make this plug too, where we're actually trying to raise the tipped minimum wage to $15 too. So for all you folks out there who work in the service industry,
That's
like losing,
awesome.
I'm like losing my mind over this. Seriously, Amir. Like, you know, the joke on the social media joke where it's like, man, this is an Arby's. Like, this is me. Actually, every time I go to a fast food restaurant, I just be like, you deserve better than
You
this, or
deserve
never.
more.
I'm so, yeah. So, uh, but it is. I mean, you know, raising the minimum wage, that is very much important
That's
for
interesting. I
health
didn't
outcomes.
know. I had no clue that that would fall under that. Is that because then they would qualify for things such as health insurance, or what? I was a server once, um, and experienced that life, but at the same time was also hearing about some servers where they are paid like a minimum wage, so they're not so dependent on tips. And I was tipped a penny once, and I just kind of was like, "Why'd you even tip me?" Like,
Well, so this is not my area of expertise. If you want me to come
mhm,
back like for another segment, I can read up on it. But I do know it varies. So there are states that do have a higher minimum wage than the
yeah,
$2.13 tipped ones, and then it can vary by localities. So there is some variance. It's not like that's the case everywhere, but even still, you know, there can be wage theft and other problems within, you know, even for people who live in states that have theoretically raised, you know, the tip wage. And when
yeah,
businesses, you know, can do their own thing too. A business doesn't have to do the, they
that's
can be
true.
better if they wanted to, and
If
some
they
do.
wanted to.
Yeah, so not enough of them do though. So that's why we need policy. So
That's
so
interesting.
it's important.
Okay, cool. So, geez, I didn't expect that health policy was such a big world.
And I will qualify that though and say that most of the time when we say health policy, that we really are focused on like what I told you about at the beginning. So the
Right, right,
insurance, the direct medical care, or public health related policy. So
right.
I'm just saying though, you can think of it as everything that affects your health because everything does. But usually when we talk about health policy, it's more focused.
Why is it um why, just general questions again, why is it imperative for the general public, I guess, who otherwise wouldn't be educated in this area or even know what to know with the know? Why is it imperative for us to know about this information or know what health policy is made up of? If that question makes sense.
I think it does. So I would say, you know, right now, you know, COVID-19 is the answer to your question. It's an
Yeah,
answer to your question that really you know, I could not have designed something, you know, an event that would have been a better demonstration of why health
yeah,
policy is important. So I know in
yeah.
Kentucky, you know, the latest numbers, it's 4,200 Kentuckians that have died, and you know, we've had 380,000 cases, and of course, we know it's been well over, you
Hmm.
know, 400,000 people have died nationally. I think it's probably closer to 450 now. Um, and it's just
Jeez.
not a lot of people understand this, but really what we've experienced with COVID-19 has been a policy failure the whole way down. I mean, we really did not have to be in this kind of situation where this many people died and or got sick, and or where we had to shut down consistently shut things down in the
Yeah.
economy. I know early on when this all started, we were getting this binary, the two choices where we could save people or help the economy. And I'm like, that's not really a choice. First of all, that's not how that works. But also, we could have just handled it because we can put together the infrastructure to handle these things. So, one of the direct things that led to this problem was in our last federal administration, there was a couple of years ago some very direct cuts from global health disease surveillance specifically. Like, it's just
So,
like,
wait, from people actually who are appointed to look out for things like this, or kind of like a forecaster or something like that.
absolutely. So we have a very robust
Jeez.
surveillance system that has, and I will say, the funding is not what it should have been for a long time, and this often happens across different,
I feel like y'all
administrations.
never have funding,
Yeah,
especially.
so we've talked about this before. So we've the decline of public health funding has been a problem for several decades now, and we haven't, and that has had we had public health departments. I know a lot of them were still dealing with fax machines when this started last year and didn't have the workforce. So that's its own problem. But the last administration in particular actually cut support from global health systems that were specifically designed for surveillance, disease surveillance. So in the United States is really the top player in this. So we really, other countries depend on our infrastructure through like the CDC and even,
Yeah.
the military has a lot of, has a hand in that. I'm sure we all have complicated feelings about the United States military industrial complex, but one positive thing that has
Complicated
come
is
out of
right.
that was that is the global health, disease surveillance. They're part of that as well. So I'm not an epidemiologist, and it's not my specialty to get totally in the
What's that
weeds.
called?
An epidemiologist. So that is,
Epidemiologist. Got it.
yeah. So that's specifically the field that deals with surveillance. So if you ever want one on to talk about these, and there's some great Black epidemiologists in the world who can speak to this much better than myself.
Awesome.
Yes, but yes, so we did not have, the relationships and the infrastructure that we should have when this started.
Yeah.
And then all of our other policy failures made it that much worse. So when we think about uh, occupational health and workers' rights, paid leave, health insurance for people, to make sure they can get access to care, it's just all of these things we just weren't doing a good job of. So it all just came together, and
Yeah.
that's where we are. And also the racism-based disparities that existed too, that has made this much worse for Black populations, and also uh, Latino, Latinx groups, and even some Asian subgroups in places like California, like Filipino nurses have died at a much higher rate in California than other nurses, even though they're not, at a rate that's not comparable to how many of them actually are nurses. So
Yeah.
just an absolute disaster, uh, both from a public health side, but also just the United States not dealing with other systems very well,
Right.
coming to a head at once. And it's really sad. But to go back to your question, that's why people need to know, because I could, see a lot of people don't know that we can function better. Like we don't have to live like this. Actually, we could be dealing with problems, but people need to know this so they can actually advocate to their state and local governments and say,
Yeah.
hey, you need to handle this and give, implement policies to help people and save lives. So
I'm stuck on the fact that we have like appointed people, what'd you call it again?
epidemiologists.
Epidemiologists. I'm shook that I mean I didn't know what those were. And so it baffles me that we have people who actually can look out for these things. I guess, based off of other pandemics that has happened, this was like, oh, this is needed. I was just like, what's going on? Um, and so I guess with that knowledge, just that alone, um, because you know how it is now. A lot of people, so COVID is a great example of I feel so many things right now. And now that it has happened, a lot of people are taking a bigger look into their the rights they have health wise or the resources that they have to assist them. And for some situations it's too late. And it just sucks. I mean, I've never looked at CDC anything, as I'm sure a ton of other people have, until this very pandemic. Along with the fact of learning that this is probably the cleanest the population has been or taken care of themselves in terms of public interaction and stuff like that. Um, all because, again, the pandemic. Um, I just feel like I feel like with that also, people have gotten pretty comfortable in thinking we are safe. Um, we're safe and nothing atrocious outside of what we know of can happen to us. And COVID said, fuck that. Here I am. You thought. It also sucks learning and understanding how our government can do so much more for us. And they just don't. Like, they just choose not to, or they choose to put certain resources over others, which sacrifices um, funding that goes towards healthcare and education and things of that nature and resources. And you're right, we have talked about that before. I do remember when you did let me know that funding towards healthcare is low in terms of actually caring for citizens and doing research, right? Um, and providing resources. So it just sucks. And I understand and know, and hopefully viewers will understand and know, like, why this information is pertinent anytime, not just when the pandemic is happening. Um, and knowing where they can definitely flex their demands with that. So when it comes to advocating for themselves, is that just a simple situation where um, a community um, brings together some demands, maybe upon voting for certain officials to come into office that are over their districts and things of that nature? How does that look like when it comes to, so we have the knowledge, how do we flex that knowledge to take care of ourselves and to advocate, I guess, for ourselves and our families?
That is a great question. And
I hope it was hard constructing
it's
it.
no, you did a great job. And there are many layers to that question, which and now I feel like
I
I'm gonna
always do that.
no,
I always bust
I
out these
love
questions where there's like step one, step two, step three.
right. I'm like, I'm gonna have to bring a notebook in the future so I can write note, make sure I got each part. Um, but I think in the immediate term, you were getting at it a little bit in your questions, but yes, so it is really important to be involved in the advocacy process, both in electoral season when we're electing officials and also throughout the rest of the year. So um, there, in COVID-19, the federal government failure, uh, it made the state level failures worse on a lot of levels. So there was just never enough federal, you know, there was patchwork funding, there was not enough, support for getting robust testing, and those are
Yeah.
things that really need to be, coordinated by the federal government. But the states too were also often making very poor decisions, and again, that was across political parties. And so you have to be very mindful of who you're electing locally.
Mhm.
All of the down ballot people, it's not something we pay attention to because it's always like the presidential elections and then, maybe Senate and some major level things that get
Right.
attention. But your governor and your state representatives and state senators have a lot of power. And so paying attention to who those folks are is very important. And um, being involved in networks, whether you want it to be partisan or not. There are partisan, there are parties, of course, but there are also other, groups that are affiliated with different types, reproductive justice or LGBTQ rights or racial justice, and other groups that are also involved in electoral politics where you
Yeah.
can, support candidates as well, and support, voter registration and all of those things. but also being involved in the process throughout the year. So when, it's hard to keep track, and that's why it's nice to be involved in organizations that coordinate and get a lot of information out and help coordinate, advocacy days. But thinking about in Frankfurt, knowing when they're doing budget sessions and allocating funding to systems. So we're having conversations at the federal and state level right now about like making sure that we're getting funding to unemployment systems because they're so terrible. And that was a major thing that helped people not get unemployment throughout the
Yeah.
year. So those types of things are happening all the time, those decisions and that legislation that will affect, come back to bite us, for better or for worse in the future. So that's definitely immediately what folks can do, and we can continue to have conversations about, what that can look like. But
Right.
people would be surprised too. I mean, even obvious stuff. This is not COVID-19 related, but it's my favorite example. Favorite in that it's just like a terrible example. There was of how hard this can be. For a number of years here in Kentucky, we had a pregnant workers bill that was just designed to give people accommodations while they're pregnant so they can keep their job. And this was, a thing that appealed to people across the political aisle. It was, heavily supported by both Republican and Democratic women in the Kentucky legislature. And it still took several years of, advocacy, several sessions to get out, even though it was
Right.
not, I mean, again, it was something that everybody is anybody against pregnant workers? I used to, when I was advocating for it, I would ask that. Nobody's ever raised their hand. So I don't, I have not heard of anybody yet who was, and yet it still took a lot of advocacy to get it through the finish line. And so the point, even though that wasn't directly related to what we were talking about, but it was just about how getting good legislation passed, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there's not enough resources, even for well-meaning legislators. They need help, they need expertise, and they need people advocating in the community on things. Another example, and I don't know how much you want to get into that today. I mean, this could be its own segment, but thinking about
Definitely. Yeah.
policing legislation too, like Colorado was kind of the first state to pass comprehensive policing legislation last summer. But they had a woman, I think it was a Black woman, who had been introducing the legislation for years. So
Jeez.
they were ready for the moment, but it had just take a long time. And then finally the political moment was there, but it was very hard. So these are very,
Man.
hard things that don't happen quick, but it does take a lot of support from the community. I have a second answer though, if you don't mind me continuing.
Go on, please.
So because I've been thinking about my own role in advocacy, even though that's what I do for a living. I've been looking at what's going on in the country, and I'm like, I feel like there's some real problems underneath this beyond what the typical, advocacy measures can solve. And I have
agree.
been
It's like a two-way street,
reading
right?
a lot and learning. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm trying to really get underneath, and figure out what's going on. And,
Yeah.
there's, we need to be very honest in this country about how racism really has shaped to where we have gone. And even, this is not an understanding that most people, I think not even most of our own people really understand. I mean, we know our experiences, but as far as educating ourselves on how these systems have really just shaped how our country, functions. If we don't have that understanding, we can't get to where we're trying to go. And so to be more specific about that, where we are in this healthcare culture we have, where people don't expect, the government or our institutions to actually take care of people. To me, that's more of the problem than everyone reading the CDC every day. I mean, if that's not your job, you don't need to do that every day. I mean, really, we can't expect people to do that, but we should have expectations that, our institutions will care about the health of our citizens. But we don't have that expectation often, and
Black people in general.
Everybody. I mean, people,
Yeah.
it's thinking about health insurance. We've been, every time we try to expand health insurance to the wider public, people start saying like, oh my God, the country's going to fall apart. We're going to be communist or whatever. Like just the nonsense
all over that. And I'm like,
I'm just, It's kind of nuts, but that didn't manifest from nowhere, though. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't know this, but Harry Truman in 1945, I think, tried to propose national health insurance for everybody. So again, was 70 years ago or something.
I didn't know that.
And what happened was the American Medical Association was the top group to lobby against it because they didn't want to integrate hospitals. Like, I'm not making this up, but this is the reason.
What type
So
of
they
shit?
came, yeah, so they came up with the campaign actually to make it related to communism because it was the 1940s, so it worked. It was like, we're going to be a communist country if we do this. So that is where that language came from, that racism
And it's literally
kind of.
just because that's what they put on it. That's what they stamped on it. There's no evidence of that or anything. They just stamped it like communism.
Yeah, yeah, and we are really alone as far as, I don't love the term developed, but as far as countries that are considered developed, I mean, we're
Hmm.
really alone as far as countries
It's
that don't have some
embarrassing.
sort of national, insurance program for their
Yeah.
citizens. It looks different in different countries, but they have it. Because the idea that you should be relying on the free market to not die is preposterous, and everybody should feel that way, but yet here we are. So,
And is this a push towards communism, but also not wanting to provide that type of free service for Black people and poor people? Um, Thinking
oh
about
yeah,
what
and
you
and I will say Black people specifically,
specifically.
uh,
Okay.
because I do think that's important. And other groups have also suffered a lot of historical systemic discrimination as well. So I don't want to say that we're the only one, but anti-Black racism has fueled a lot of
Yes.
problematic policies we have that are now causing harm continuously here, both to Black people especially, but also to everyone. So getting back to the tipped wages we were talking about, that was also a product of racism because certain occupations were left out of the New Deal when we really saw our first minimum wage, but they were
Yeah.
the occupations that Black people were very likely to have. So you think about domestics and people who worked as
Of
servers.
course.
That was the reason. And in fact, I have kind of a litmus test where if
Mm.
I, every time I stumble upon a policy that's so preposterous and harmful that it doesn't make sense, I tell myself it's probably because of racism unless
Racism.
prove otherwise. And I'm usually right, which is really depressing. But yeah, so we have a lot of policies that were specifically designed to be somewhere between not helpful to Black people and actively harmful to Black people. That are now, those policies, a lot of them are still around, but also the legacy of those policies, whether it's in our rhetoric or
Mhm.
the way we think culturally about individualism and self-sufficiency. A lot of it is a product from that. Um,
I've been
from
hooked
that.
on individualism a lot lately now that I've understood more and more of it through the movement and stuff. Um, I think it's so sad, so sad. Like it's Black History Month, which is dope. Every day is the day to celebrate Black history, but we get a month. Who gives a fuck? To be extra blackety black. Um, I remember last year I would see on my timeline, and of course they have been since erased, but privileged white friends of mine, acquaintances now, or just people I know, they literally post a status like, um, slavery is over. Slavery is over. Get over yourselves. You're able to enjoy this country as much as everyone else. Some stupid shit like that. And it's just kind of like, while physical handcuffs and chains are over, slavery has definitely put into play so many of the theoretical chains and things that we have to break ourselves from, and we're still to this day proving that we are worthy of existence and that we are existing and we're here. And it just so kills me that you mentioning that a lot of those health policies are trash, all because they're just trying to limit the care and acknowledgement of Black people. It's absolutely sick. It's sick as hell. And it also sucks because with that, Black people don't believe in the healthcare system. Black people don't believe in any of that shit. And I don't want to be like, I don't blame them, but I don't know where we go when it comes to healing as a community. I don't know who has to take actions first. I don't know if Black people need to take action in forgiving that system and how to meet with them, or if federally that's changes that they need to make in order to gain the trust of the Black people. I mean, hell, like hearing about this COVID vaccine, a lot of Black people I know are like, fuck no, it's Tuskegee all over again. I can't even fucking say the word, but it's experiments on Black people all over again. And no, and all the white people and them can go get that shit before us, before I see how arms are falling off or whatever. And then I do know some Black people who are like, I'm in there, I'm getting that shit. I think my mom was one of them. Like, I'm getting it because she got COVID. So she's just like, it was a terrible experience for her. So she's
I'm
like,
sorry to hear that.
no, it's okay. She's good and she healed. But I guess what we've also learned, and it's annoying me because it feels like everything that happens, it's like COVID. Um, any aftermath after the fact. My mom's dealing with heart palpitations now because of it. Um, it's because of COVID. Just like, oh my gosh, everything's fucking COVID. There's always a symptom after the fact, or I don't even know. But anyways, she's one of the ones that's like, I'm gonna definitely go get that vaccine because I don't want to deal with that again. Um, I guess who should jump first? Who should make moves first? The federal government or Black people? I don't,
Oh, I
because I don't
100%.
know.
I totally think this needs to be coming from institutions. And I will just say, I will be getting the vaccine. I cannot wait. I have vaccine envy. Really, really excited about it. But I am really sympathetic to people who have skepticisms about medical care. And, Tuskegee's probably the most well-known instance, but I mean, we are, still seeing evidence of racism in the healthcare system
Yeah,
today. So that didn't just happen decades ago, that is happening
no,
today. And we also experience racism in all our other systems. So it would be silly to think that, oh, yes, we're experiencing racism in the workplace and in banking and financial institutions and from the police and every other aspects of our life, but not healthcare. That's not how that works, actually.
no, no,
So I,
no.
um, even as a health policy professional, I want to validate people's concerns and experiences because those come from very valid places, and I really understand. And I wholeheartedly believe it's the responsibility of um, the government and also other institutions, the research community and the medical practitioner community to address these things. It's not the responsibility of the individuals who are affected to do that. And so there's a lot of work to be done. I
Yeah,
feel cautiously optimistic. I'm in a lot of national groups that are taking seriously, I think, these things. And it's a multi-layered process. It's everything from being honest about the problems and historically where it came from to putting the resources there, whether it's recruiting more, diverse medical practitioners that
I
won't
was
fix
about
the
to
whole
ask,
problem,
are
but
these
that's
groups
important.
including more
Yeah.
diversity? Because I'll also see these days groups that have no diversity. It's just white people talking about we're going to be more diverse, or you know what I'm saying, wanting to make decisions towards diversity and
Yes,
inclusion,
I know what you mean.
right? With nobody on the board to assist them with that. So it's like,
Right.
fail. Yeah.
Right. And so that's not a magic solution, but that is a part of it. So is having that diversity reflected in your workforce and especially in leadership too. So having, Black people who are, or, other non-white minorities who are actually running the hospitals or running these institutes or
Yeah.
just deciding, allocating funding and deciding what gets studied and whatnot. That's a really important part of that. And I know those types of discussions are very much happening. So, it's we're just gonna have to wait and see, what
Yeah.
continues to happen. But I do know from the institutional perspective, there a lot of major groups who are really taking the time to say we need to be honest about this problem and really do things to go forward. So we will see what happens. But I feel
We'll
like
see.
I'm always forgetting thoughts. But I wanted to say there was something else. I don't remember. I'm always forgetting. It was something related to one of your questions, and I'm like, I don't know.
Was it in relation to, so let's see, I asked about who needs to jump first. You said institutions. I don't remember what I asked before that. Crap. Okay, well, I'm no
Well,
assistance. But if you think about it, please throw it in there. So,
oh, I
oh,
remember. This is
yes.
important. I'm glad I remember.
Okay.
Um, Also, so I was thinking about your comment about people who post ignorant things about slavery being over,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
which, we all know enough to know that the ramifications of slavery are still with us. But it's also, I think, another instance where, I'm an educator. I have an educator bias. So I want to believe that if everyone just understood everything, that would fix everything. That's not true, by the way. A lot of terrible people are very educated and they know a lot of things.
They
So
know a
that's not
lot.
true. That's not true. But I am very sensitive to the power of just not being ignorant. So, but for people who I really think don't mean harm, honestly, I think not understanding our systems that we have today fuels a lot of that ignorance. And that's also goes back to the policy question. So this is why people need to understand policy, because they need to understand that these things are created. And criminal justice, again, which I cannot wait to get into it over time in our segments, because it's also the example, just epitomizing this whole thing. Like, it's not just slavery. It's like we have a whole mass incarceration system that
Yeah,
was intentionally created for a lot of problematic reasons. And of course, racism was very much part of it, but it's not
yeah.
even just that. We work with a great institute, this national, called the Vera Institute of Justice, and
Mhm.
we do a lot of work with them, and they're fantastic. But they have a whole publication series going on that talks about, how it's grown in rural America and where the roots of that are. And there are scholars who study that as well. But these things aren't unintentional.
Yeah,
They are created. We have a lot of problematic systems that exist today that intentionally, harm people, whether it's non-white minorities or poor people. So it's not, it's ignorant to say that, oh, slavery's over. It's very ignorant, but you don't need to talk about slavery either. You can just talk about problematic policy decisions that have,
exactly. They go
come to
straight to that.
that
Slavery is
existed.
over.
Right.
Like, okay.
It's That's many layers, when I see things like that, I'm just like, I've grown. You probably know that quote from Insecure, that's growth, where it's like a is it GIF or GIF? I never know which one to say.
I think I've heard people say GIF and I've heard GIF. So I think it's kind of like Euro or Hero. So whatever your cup of tea
Okay, I don't know. But anyways, it just, it's her friend Kelly, I think. Kelly on
is.
Insecure, going, that's growth. And so that's me now.
Oh,
I don't respond to that anymore. I'm just like, bless your heart, as we say in the South, and I'm just gonna leave you.
facts. Bless your heart and delete block.
Right, right. Uh, yeah.
No.
But yeah, it's mass incarceration, it's not funding institutions, it's problematic housing policy, it's all these things that exist now that keep people oppressed and disenfranchised.
Oh
So
yeah. And they don't, as you said, with more understanding and education and also unlearning their racist um perspectives, because I saw recently on a post, white people are just inherently racist, and then it's something that needs to be unlearned and worked on, in order to understand that and be true allies to like black liberation or something like that. Definitely more interested in learning more about that, because I also was recently told, um, people who aren't trans are inherently transphobic. And so I'm feeling like those white people who have like mixed children, like, I'm not racist, I have mixed kids. Like, okay, well, so I'm feeling the same way. I'm not trans. I've never hated a trans person, and I have trans friends and I just love it all. But I don't know. Anyways, that's something to get into later, I guess. But I definitely feel unlearning and learning more will open the eyes to people when it comes to comments and stupid shit like that. You know, just knowing that, okay, slavery's over. However, as you said, we all are still healing and dealing with traumatic systems in place from that. So, I mean, we're still fucking dealing with it. And it is, again, just insane how racism in this country has and is running so damn much.
I mean,
Unbelievable.
yeah, and I will so comment about you're having biracial children or whatever.
Yeah.
I will be I read all the time. I don't do anything else. I have no life. But yeah, I was just reading this fantastic book called Fear of the Black Body, which is and I will be probably name dropping books sometimes, which is actually about the
Perfect.
history of fat phobia and how it originated
Mm,
largely because of racism.
yeah.
But it was talking about funny story. So Kellogg, like Mr. Kellogg, the guy who
The
founded
cereal?
Kellogg, yeah,
What?
he was a fan of Sojourner Truth, and he belonged to an abolitionist church, and he adopted Black children, in fact. But was also one of the major founders of the modern eugenicist movement in the United States in the 20th century. So like he totally like believed in eugenics and like wholeheartedly. So I like to tell people that, so to remind them that actually, yes, you can live in that contradiction and hypocrisy, and it makes no sense, but it's very
Right.
possible.
You
So
can do both.
being around cool Black people does not, or loving a few Black people does not
Right.
make you immune from having really problematic
That's crazy.
okay, so hit them with that if you want. Yeah, I know. When I was reading it, I was just like, what?
What?
So
You can't have both,
that's
sir.
I love reading history actually because there's so much of that. But it actually, uh, I have found reading history, it helps me feel better about now because history was so bad in so many ways. It's like,
Yes, I
yeah,
feel that, and I've talked to a few people about my perspective with this and feeling that when it comes to us Black people, we have not, and I'm not invalidating anyone's experiences whatsoever. But I know for the majority of us, um, we haven't dealt with a lot of the things that our grandparents or even our parents have dealt with back in the past. So we're at some type of a level of comfort right now, which is why, capitalism is overruling us and overrunning us and shit when it comes to us. Like, do we want to be free or do we want to eat? Um, when it comes to where to be and falling into trends when it comes to Black liberation and stuff, people not diving into the understanding of getting a grind on your education right now. That's what I'm trying to do right now while it's cold and not out there marching. Like, yeah, trying to learn a little bit more about our history and stuff. See where I can get in terms of supporting campaigns, because we got to get these old white people out and get some fresh faces in there. Black people or some very good white allies. Um, but I've just felt from everything I've witnessed and from what I've heard back then, um, we're kind of comfortable. And I know that's probably an unpopular opinion, but I feel that we are. Um, and we haven't dealt with being hoes in the middle of the street just because we're Black.
I mean, it's hard, and also too, it's really, I mean, yeah, we are dealing with racism and these things today and police brutality and those
And we're
things.
allowed
But,
to fuss back, like, fuck
right,
you, and continue on. Back then, you
right.
couldn't do that or you're getting
But it was
hung
it was
around the
so
corner.
different. Yeah, I am so glad you brought this up actually because it was so different. And like you said, this is our parents and grandparents. This wasn't a long time ago, but just when you're reading books from organizers from that time, or even like Ida B. Wells is great, and I've read
Mhm.
her book on lynching. Probably it's been a year or something like that. But when you're thinking about all the violence that was happening all the time, I mean, it really it's just hard to even imagine. Like sometimes when I actually stop to think about JFK, RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, all getting killed like within a relatively short amount of time. All of these bombings that were happening,
Mm-hmm.
like bombings, just
Yeah.
the lynching all the time, like the violence during that, it's just one of those things where
Through
we are
the
not.
roof.
I
Like,
mean, it is just, and I'm just talking about to Black people, but there is also, if you look at the history of like the farm workers movement and,
mm,
the West and, well, or anti-Asian violence that was going on in the early 20th century, especially around World War II and all these things,
white
and
people were
let's
just on a fucking
let
roll. Like, they just did whatever
yeah,
they fucking
yeah,
wanted to.
yeah. Or like if you're really reading the history of Native Americans, not just the high level awful stuff, but like the detailed extermination of communities. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like really, really awful. I have to be, it can be very trying, and it's really hard to come back from that when you're reading it all the time and think
Yeah.
about things in a measure, like, because you're just like,
But
but
it's a
it is,
good, it's
but most
good.
people,
Uh-huh. Go on. Sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I was just saying it's a good, I don't want to say reminder. I mean, yeah, maybe a good reminder because we learn whatever we do in public school, and that usually is like the tip of the surface. So a lot of things we hear from just our experiences and other people who just do know, we're hearing these things for the first time in our adulthood, and it's just good to know. It's good to know real history. It's good to know the truth. And of course we can't rely on these public white school systems to tell us the truth or anything like that. And I need people to realize the shit that white people was on back then. Like, they just was even they just thank God we're not dealing with. I mean, there's still some people out here. I mean, fucking Ahmad, like, just going for a jog and they fucked him up. Like, what type of shit? So there's still some white people out here who are on that bullshit. But to the extent where it was completely acceptable by the government, and the fact that the police force was created to beat black people and keep black people down, is just absolutely, they're a little sneakier with shit now and a little more down low. And everything is through laws and this, that, and the third. But I mean, you're
No,
right. Like,
it's we have come somewhere. It's hard to feel that way sometimes when you're looking at, when you understand things and you're looking at stats, and we have understand all the struggles that we're still going through. But
yeah,
God, it really puts in perspective to me, how spectacular it was to see Reverend Warnock get elected in Georgia last month, which feels like it was a million years ago. And it's not even about him and John Ossoff, who is
yeah.
Jewish. And that's a big, I think he's the first Jewish senator to be elected from the South. I think I read that, or at least, in a long time, if not ever.
I'm not sure, but
Um,
that's dope.
yeah. And it's not about, electing those two guys will, changing everything, because that is never how electoral politics. I guarantee you, even if your fave gets elected, like, that is not going to transform the
I feel like it's
landscape
gonna be pushed
tomorrow.
back, pushed back, pushed back, and then they
Right.
still.
Right.
I feel like people still
But
always have their own agenda a little bit.
Right. But it was seeing so many people mobilize, because of efforts of many people, not just Stacey Abrams, even though she is a fantastic organizer, but just knowing, when you know the history, in the Black Belt, Deep South,
Yeah,
of the racist terror that was happening to people, like violence all the time that was openly accepted and never going to get prosecuted. Like, it's just traumatic. It makes me, I try to do this too, because I want to be, um, give my elders space, especially because
yeah.
sometimes, we're all of us who are young, every generation of young people thinks they know everything. They're always trying to tell the old people, like, we need to be doing, the revolution and all this stuff, and they just look at you crazy. But no, it's the stuff they went through. I mean, it's really, like, when I think about my grandfather and things he went through, I'm just amazed that you all made it out of this time period with yourselves intact, truly.
I
um
know, and there's still some dirt going on
Oh yeah, but it's still
LMPD is on their bullshit this weekend. I don't know. Luckily, I didn't do nothing too crazy. That's why I said don't be searching for me. So I'm glad, but I don't want shit to die down. I don't.
yeah.
I know in this day and age, we have young people who don't give a fuck, who are screaming at whoever they need to scream at, who are wielding their guns wherever. And, I think there are definitely some benefits. The only thing is, elders are looking at us like, learn to organize, learn to do a little bit more. And I think some people are learning the importance of getting into areas and positions and taking seats where they can have some kind of control over policy, changing policies and things of that nature. And that's to include, I feel Black liberation is, um, a part of that is rebuilding our community. And with that is definitely being able to change policies, especially when it comes to things that you focus on, which is healthcare and things of that nature. Some people aren't looking at certain things like that, how systems everywhere have held us down. And I'm just excited to learn more and more about how, um, the healthcare world and policies among there is one. I didn't even think about it. And you putting that into perspective today is just like, we're just fucked all around.
But you know what though? I am, as you know, not an organizer myself, and I'm always happy to go find some, and you know more of them probably than I do at this point.
At this point, maybe.
If we ever, yeah, you might actually, but I want to give kudos to this generation we have of activists because it's really one leadership wise, it's much more inclusive. I mean, I appreciate everything our elders did of yesteryear, but it was not, it was very much led by men in a very respectable image. And I was just reminded this week of like how folks like Rustin and others, Bayard Rustin, were their identities were largely erased from their
Yeah.
role. And women not having to say that they should. I know there were women leaders, of course, in the movement, but you have a much more women led, as you should. And
As it should. Yeah.
and an increasing, not enough, but an increasing understanding and elevating of of lesbian women and trans women and other people and those and other communities. So it's really that makes a huge difference, and we didn't see that the last time around,
No.
so to speak. So that's important. And all the coalitions that exist together, I mean, it's very heartening to see different types of groups who have integrated with Black Lives Matter. Like I've never seen so many different groups of Asian folks and Latinx folks who are also uplifting these things, and it is
Oh,
awesome. And
yes.
then in the other direction, supporting their communities and what they're working on. Like, I know technology and instant communication has helped a lot of that, but it's like, yes, we really have this opportunity to uh, link arms together,
I
learn each
agree.
other's history,
Yeah.
and really get something done. So I'm excited about it. And the young people know, like they're like fighting the curriculums in school, like
Oh,
and
yes.
doing TikToks on like colonization and stuff. And I was like, when I was 15, like I don't know, I was obsessed with a boy and I was just in my feelings. I wasn't doing presentations on like colonization and the history of imperialism and
I wasn't doing
explaining
that shit
qualified
either.
immunity on a video. I'm like, these young people are no, I feel good about things.
I'm
Uh,
excited. I already know things probably won't. I mean, it's gonna be a decade long fight. But this, I'm happy that we're getting somewhere. We're getting on the path. But I know segments like this and other, um, public classes and things of that nature, public as in like Black people providing educational sessions. Um, I know that's definitely going to help, um, because knowledge is like, I don't want to say power, but I guess it is. That's definitely what we need to be armed with going in, and not just brute force. So I'm excited. I know we are creeping past our time that we were chatting, or that I wanted us to chat, I guess, but very good conversation. very good introduction into what it is that we will be focusing on for our future episodes to come. And I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to just learn more and very intrigued when it comes to um, you mentioning chatting more about the incarceration system. Um, I think that's going to definitely be a gem in this segment because, like you said, things are set up on purpose. But I don't think, even myself, I don't think that a lot of us understand how the energy being put into that to manipulate and maneuver the Black community and stuff. Um, so I'm definitely interested to tap into that in our future episodes. Oh, this is good
Well, I
talk.
look forward to it. I
I'm
know.
really excited. Yeah. So, I guess with that being said, Carmen, um, thank you so much for joining. Do you have any last minute thoughts or anything regarding our introductory episode?
No, I just hope folks are taking care of themselves. I will make a plug for the double masking. If you're not already wearing 2 masks, do that. There's the data continues to be good about how helpful that is for you, not just for protecting others. But we're
Yeah.
at the end of the pandemic, or not the end yet. I won't. We are on the downslide. We are declining cases. More people are getting vaccinated. But we still need to protect ourselves. So just gonna put that plug in for folks. Because I know we're all antsy. Like, I miss my life so much. Okay, it's been literally almost a year. So
not a long time at all.
But yeah, I just want to say that. But no, I'm looking forward to continuing to chat. It's good. It's just one step at a time. And like you
Basically.
said, and we'll get there.
Basically. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the tidbit on the double masking. I've been seeing that a lot lately, and I actually didn't know. I thought the mask and the filter was what they were trying to emulate, but didn't know that about the double mask. That was probably on the CDC website, and I did not look at that.
That's why you have me. I will
That's
just
why I have
give
Carmen.
you the highlights. I'll give you the highlights.
Thank you. I don't even have to go through. Just give me the summary. I rely on you and my mom.
Okay.
Well, Carmen, plug yourself. Whatever information that you want to plug, social media, where can people find you?
That's right. So I still on Twitter at Carmen R. Mitchell. That's my Twitter handle. And then I'm on Instagram as the lady from Kentucky. That's KY, Kentucky at the end. So
Dope.
that's where you can find me.
Please go follow Carmen, y'all. She is absolutely dope and she takes gorgeous pictures. I saw your last picture that was like black and white that you took.
Thank you. I was feeling really artsy. I rarely am excited about pictures I take of myself. It's hard to get
I feel that.
That'll probably be up there for like 5 years. That's the one good picture I took this decade. And
it was great. I absolutely loved it.
thank you.
Y'all follow Carmen and then make sure y'all follow at the One Amira Show. That's me on Instagram, where you will see all types of content, pictures, etc., to include updates for when episodes like this will be posted and up for y'all's listening pleasure. Make sure you also go visit www.theamirshow.com, where you can find more content and find full episodes again like this one. So, with that being said, thank y'all so much for checking us out and listening in. And we will definitely be chatting with y'all next month, the second Friday of March. With that being said, Carmen, tell everyone bye.
Bye. Stay safe.